Yeah, so we're very excited about the responses, but we also have to be cognizant of the fact that these can be very toxic products. The main two toxicities that we worry about with CAR-Ts that we don't have experience with other treatments are the cytokine release syndrome and neurotoxicity. Cytokine release syndrome is seen in virtually almost every patient that receives CAR-Ts, but is sort of a grading of toxicities. The majority of patients get grade 1 or 2 cytokine release syndrome, which usually means a fever, perhaps the blood pressure might drop transiently, but for the most part, these are mild side effects that can be very easily reversed, and especially if you give a drug called tocilizumab that reverses these symptoms. So the majority of these patients do very well. The toxicity that you really have to worry about with cytokine release is when you start getting to the grade 3, 4, and that's when these patients can become very sick and it can be lethal. That toxicity, luckily in myeloma so far, has been seen less frequently than with other diseases, but it is there. The NIH had a trial with BCMA CAR-Ts that was kind of like the grandfather of the CAR-Ts in BCMA, and they saw a much higher percentage of grade 3, 4 toxicity, both CRS and neurotoxicity, than has been seen with the BB21 or the Legend CAR-Ts. The neurotoxicity is another toxicity that is actually a little bit more difficult to explain as to why it occurs, but it definitely is seen in a subset of patients. The neurotoxicity is very different from the cytokine release, and it is important to differentiate when is neurotoxicity associated with cytokine release versus neurotoxicity that is not associated with cytokine release. The former responds to therapies that we give for cytokine release like tocilizumab, the latter does not. And that is something that is important to differentiate as the treatment is different. Luckily, even in very high grades of neurotoxicity, this can be reversed with high-dose steroids, which is the prime treatment for these patients. But in myeloma, for the most part, perhaps about a third of patients have neurotoxicity. Most of it is grade 1, but there have been a handful of patients that have had grade 3 or 4 neurotoxicity.